and welcome to Boss Raid, the show where we take an in-depth look at all the bosses in a video game. Today our game is Psychonauts 2, a game that was announced in 2015 and finally released in August of 2021, developed by the doubly fine people at Double Fine. Rasputin is back in an all-new adventure to work with the founding members of the Psychonauts, unlock the mysteries of their minds, and ultimately stop an old threat from reawakening. Raz retains most of his abilities from the previous game and learns a few new ones along the way. He can use his psychic powers to punch, shoot, throw, and burn his enemies, and much more. Gameplay is split between the physical world and the mental world, which takes place in the minds of various NPCs. The mental world can be a dangerous place, and it's in these worlds we find various enemies, and of course, bosses. As usual, I won't be talking much about story, but nonetheless, merely showing some of these fights can be a little spoilery. So with that out of the way, let's do this. Our first boss is the Lady Luctopus, or Lucky. She has Raz's colleagues, his fellow Psychonaut interns, held captive. She shuffles her deck and then throws down a card, which reveals what attack she's about to do. During her first phase, she can spit out 3 bombs that form proximity mines if they land on the ground. These bombs are the key to damaging her. You can blast open one of these, sound hole things on her tentacles, then launch a bomb into the hole with Raz's telekinesis throw. After that, she'll be dazed for a while, giving you time to reach some platforms on the side. There's a bomb-spawning enemy over here, but it's just a minor distraction. Once you reach the top of the platform, she'll swat at you with her cards, but this is not hard to dodge. Next, you need to blast away the glass on the top of her head, which will spawn some anchors that will allow you to drop into the back of her head. Once here, it should be obvious, but just smack at the green heart inside. We move on to phase 2. This time the tentacle hole is on the opposite side, and she'll periodically block access to it with a a tentacle of cards. She has a new attack now where she sends a string of cards flying all over the arena, telegraphed by glowing red dotted lines on the ground. She continues to throw bombs as well, which is good because you once again need to throw them in her tentacle holes, which will again stun her so that we can climb the platforms, break the glass, and attack the heart, who is looking a bit more rough than last time. In her third phase, Lucky will add a new card to her deck, a move where she electrifies the ground, which can damage Raz if he stands on it directly. However, you can use the levitation ball to move around on most stanky ground without damage. Stanky includes electrified. This lasts for a while, and she can also use her card string attack simultaneously. This time, when she uses a bomb attack, she'll spit out 5 bombs. Also, the sound hole tentacle will occasionally move from left to right. She will still try to block them, but the strategy is the same. Break the hole, grab a bomb, and throw it in. And of course, you know what comes next. Make your way towards the heart, and after one last good smacking, Lady Luctopus's luck has run out. The Judge is our first mini-boss, and soon becomes a recurring glorified enemy, but even as just a mini-boss, the Judge is pretty well fleshed out. He swings with a large gavel, a wind-up attack which hopefully gives you enough time to get out of the way. If you get too close, he'll use a much quicker downswing attack. Besides just using melee and Psyblast, there are several ways to go about damaging the Judge. You can grab his gavel and throw it back at him. When he's without his gavel, the Judge will literally throw the book at you, which you can grab in midair and throw it back at him. This doesn't do much damage, but it feels good to pull off. If you're in close when he has no gavel, he'll summon papers, perhaps they're summons, that can damage Raz, but there's a bit of a lead-up animation which should give you time to dodge. The gavel will respawn after a little while. You can burn the gavel with pyrokinesis, but it doesn't really seem to do much. A better strategy is to burn the Judge himself, as this will leave him vulnerable for several seconds as he tries to put out the flames. The next fight is absolutely bizarre and a prime example of why I love this game. We fight 3 sock puppet goats as they hurl vomit at us. Because of story reasons, our partner Compton Bull is on the screen in the background, and we're trying to assist him with his cooking. All 3 judges will spray the arena floor with a purple substance that causes contact damage. Sometimes empty tin cans are included with the purple gunk, offering a safe place to stand on. The gloop may also contain gooey green chunks which contain health when broken open. From what I've seen, each judge has a slightly different attack. Headbutt and Metalis, on the left and right respectively, will occasionally bend down and do a sweeping ram attack through the arena. This attack clears any purple stuff on the ground and can even pop open green health sacks. Fawn in the middle doesn't do this. He is, however, the only one who will sometimes spit a sequence of white projectiles, one after another, aimed directly at Raz. He's also the one that spits out the ingredients we need to find. Of course, all the ingredients are covered in purple goo, so we have to pick them up one by one until we find the right one. Then we simply toss it into one of the vents on either side of the arena, a similar mechanic to Lady Luctopus's tentacle holes. The ingredient we need is displayed on a screen right above said vents, and if we choose the wrong ingredient, we have to wait for Fawn to spit out more. After finding 3 ingredients, a bunch of enemies will spawn, and after killing them all off, we go into a kind of quick time thing where we just have to mash a button to feed the already overstuffed judge until they explode. This is the only way to damage them, and we have no control over which judge we take down, meaning Metalis is the unlucky first victim. If you fail to stuff them in a timely manner, more enemies will spawn, and you'll have to take them all out again before getting another chance. Metalis is then replaced by an egg beater as the fight continues into phase 2. The other two continue to use their same attacks, only this time Fawn will sometimes barf directly on the spinning egg beaters to launch a volley of vomit projectiles all over the arena. Yeah. The egg beater will also perform its own attack, spinning around the arena doing contact damage. Also, occasionally a few enemies will spawn in. 3 more ingredients in the chute, and again a round of spawning enemies. This time a couple stronger enemies enter the fray to make things a bit more difficult, and once they're dealt with, it's quick time once again. This time Headbutt is our gourmet recipient, who is promptly replaced by a spatula. The only new thing we have to worry about in phase 3 is, of course, the spatula, with an attack similar to the previous ram attacks, except faster and with less telegraphing time. I found this fight a little difficult at first. Using the levitation ball was a huge help for me. It gives a boost of speed, which makes dodging incoming attacks easier, and it not only keeps you from touching the purple stuff, but it actually clears it out of the way. Also, health sacks are super useful, but you have to make sure you can spare a few seconds to crack them open without getting hit. After finding the last 3 ingredients, only 2 enemies spawn, this time a heavy censer and a variant of our old friend the Judge, who uses a meat tenderizer instead of a gavel. Finally, we stuff the Fawn, and with that, the judges have been sentenced. To death, I guess. We fight Panic Attack multiple times throughout Psyking's Sensorium. During the first encounter, we can't damage it at all, as it moves too fast. However, the next time we encounter it, we have learned a new Psy ability that allows us to slow down time. Panic has a few attacks. It will wind up and toss out several projectiles in a straight line that will conflagrate Raz if any of them hit. It has a claw attack and a jumping claw attack. Sometimes it will clone itself and charge up, then use a long distance charging attack that can knock Raz down, and will usually try to use a quick follow-up attack if you don't get up fast enough. The key to doing damage is to use the slowdown ability, Time Bubble, to slow it down, and then hit it with regular attacks. Otherwise it'll simply dodge or counter. It teleports after performing an attack, which can make things a bit tricky, as slowdown not only has a short timer, unless you upgrade it, but it also has a cooldown period, and I found it a bit too easy to slow down Panic right before it teleports, meaning by the time you've caught back up with it, the effect is worn off and your meter hasn't quite refilled yet. Then, just as you're spamming the slowdown button, your meter finally refills, then slowdown is cast, but Panic has just finished an attack and teleports away and the cycle begins again. But if you play more carefully than I did, you shouldn't have this problem. During the third encounter with Panic, the fight begins with several smaller sensors spawning in. It's best to take them out first as quickly as possible. Also, Panic's health bar has been demoted from persistent top of the screen to only floating above Panic's head. In the fourth and final counter, we face 2 Panic attacks simultaneously, but no new moves or other enemies to worry about. Panic can hit hard, but thankfully there is respawning health in the arena to collect, and after this Panic attack, just like the Judge, it is delegated to occasional glorified lesser enemy. Next up is Cassie, the Die-Brarian. Like most bosses, the Die-Brarian will summon enemies. One particularly annoying enemy she summons is one that we just was introduced to earlier in the level, the Enabler. Enablers make it so that other enemies can't be damaged at all until the Enabler is defeated. The invulnerability is signified by the glowing green aura surrounding them. Thankfully, they can only target one enemy at a time, and of course, the one she spawns targets her. They have a ton of HP, dodge most attacks so that you pretty much have to use the slowdown ability, and have an annoying knockback attack. I also learned much later that burning them renders them basically useless for a short time, but I didn't know that during this fight. If you want to damage the Die-Brarian, you have to take out the Enabler first. The Die-Brarian has a few offensive tactics. Probably the most common one is where she fires a swarm of bees at you, as in the letter B. They home in and fly quickly towards Raz. She'll do this mostly while you're fighting spawned-in enemies. She can shake the entire room, causing books to fall from above. Their shadows give away where they'll land, so they're not too difficult to dodge. Ink bottles will also fall, leaving ink on the ground for a long time thereafter. Ink is another form of stanky ground. It slows down movement and makes it impossible to jump, and can't even be walked over with the levitation ball. She also has a shush attack in which she attempts to blow Raz off the arena into the surrounding damaging ink pool. There are a few ways to damage Die. The simplest is to just fire Psyblast at her. You can also grab a stray book and throw it at her, but this does less damage. She can be slowed, but the effect doesn't last very long and isn't really useful. After taking her health down a third of the way, she'll fall over with her face resting on the arena floor, revealing a switch behind the locked gate, which is her mouth. Here we need to use another new ability that we just learned in this brain, projection. Raz makes a 2D archetype of himself, which is able to slip into the gate and pull the switch. Also, the archetype is voiced by Gur, and that is just absolutely perfect.
I'm so glad you're here. Is that a penny over there?
As per story reasons, we have 3 aspects of Cassie's mind cheering us on from the sidelines. Once we open the gate, one of the aspects will jump inside in an attempt to fight the Die-Brarian from within. After the first aspect enters, we go into the second phase of the fight, which is basically the same except she spawns slightly stronger enemies in, and this is also true for the third phase, in which she summons 2 enablers at the start. Each phase can kind of be thought of as corresponding to a different Cassie aspect. During the first phase, we will only hear from Rider Cassie, who will occasionally throw down a large fountain pen that we can pick up and hurl at the Die-Brarian that deals a decent amount of damage. At the end of phase 1, Rider Cassie enters the Die-Brarian, and then phase 2 begins. At phase 2, we're encouraged by Teacher Cassie, who throws down a giant ruler that again we can throw at Die. Lastly, phase 3 belongs to Counterfeiter Cassie, who throws down this thing. Letter opener, hairpin, lockpick, well, whatever it is functionally indistinguishable from the previous 2 items. If you fail to open the gate while she's down, the Die-Brarian will rise up, regaining her lost health. However, she's down for an extremely long time, and I don't think many people will encounter this problem. This fight isn't too hard, especially because by now we have a ton of health. The biggest issue is dealing with the enemies, and the enablers make things bothersome, but if health is an issue, there are, as usual, ways to collect health, this time by destroying crumpled pieces of paper and books scattered around the arena. There's not much to say about our third and final mini-boss. Bad Mood is extremely gimmicky and not exactly difficult to defeat. At first it seems invincible. It has a reaching physical attack and will shoot out scribbly exclamation points at Raz that will follow him around moving wildly. It will sometimes cast a large white circle on the ground underneath Raz, and if you don't get out of the way in time, you will be temporarily blinded. Using this attack, however, also leaves it vulnerable. The green shield around it drops, and it's at this time that you need to use the Clairvoyance ability. This allows you to literally see the world from its eyes. You need to look around until you find the source of the bad mood, represented by a previously invisible heart in a cage. Exit Clairvoyance, break the cage, and the heart will return to the bad mood, instantly destroying it. Just like the Judge and Panic Attack, we'll see this guy a few more times in a less than mini-boss capacity. Truheltia Memonstria is another trio of bosses rolled into one fight. This battle mostly takes place atop Raz's side portal, acting as a makeshift boat as we circle around the island. There is an inner and an outer lane that we can move freely through, however, this is our only movement options. You can't change direction or jump. There are bits of land all along the ring, and at first you might think that these are meant to be avoided, but they actually are populated with health-containing vines, so the opposite is true. Each member of the trio will rotate in, attacking one at a time, and each one has a unique attack. Helmet will shoot his fruit, around 12 or so spiked tomatoes, all along the ring. They explode on impact, but can be taken out with Psyblasts. Tia will launch Molotov missiles at Raz, then protect herself using her petals. Simply use Psyblast to rocket the Molotovs back at her to break her defenses. She can then be attacked with regular Psyblasts, or by returning more of her Molotovs. Truman's attack is the simplest to dodge. He spits flames that will only hit you if you are on the same lane as the orange and red coloration telegraphs. The only real way of causing damage is using Psyblast. You should try to repel Tia's Molotovs as often as possible, otherwise just spam Psyblast. During Helmet's rotation, I instead focused on clearing the waters of his tomatoes as they're persistent even after he tags out and can really be a pain if left alone. During Truman's attack is the best time to get a ton of hits, especially if you don't have to worry about any tomatoes. He's basically a free target. There's a transitional phase after taking around 33.3% of Memonstria's health down. Our pal Bob is being held captive by a giant golden moth. Upon attempting to rescue him, we're ambushed by several enemies, including a bad mood. After easily taking care of all these enemies, we go back to the water. The trio continues its assault in the same manner, except now the moth is following Raz overhead, occasionally sprinkling some dust in our path. If you make contact with the dust, the controls will be inverted and vision will be distorted for several seconds. After another 33.3% of damage, there is a bit of a cutscene, but no land fight this time, we just go straight back to the Psy Portal boat. From what I can tell, the only thing that's different is that we're once again free of the moth's annoyance, though the boat might also be moving slightly faster, it's hard to tell. Despite a bunch of different stuff going on here, the fight is actually fairly straightforward. Again, just spam Psy Blast and avoid getting hit as best you can, and you should have no trouble. I should also mention that thus far, I hadn't upgraded any of my Psy abilities, which probably would have made things a little bit easier. And just like that, we're already at our final boss fight, and the difficulty is ramped up quite a bit for this one. Maligula has 5 phases, and between each one, Raz will get a little help from his fellow interns through cutscenes. During the first phase, she appears as a water tornado thing. Maligula really only has 2 moves here, but they both hit hard and are hard to dodge. She'll summon 3 snakes made of water one at a time that slither toward Raz, then jump at him. They are very quick and require a bit of good timing to dodge. My trick was to wait just until they jump, then dodge out of the way in the most opposite direction possible. Her other attack is a charge attack in which she quickly darts towards Raz, not only causing huge damage, but can potentially knock him out of the arena, causing even more damage. I found slowdown to be extremely useful for this. She also moves somewhat erratically in general, and if you get too close, she can do a reaching attack. The strategy here is to avoid damage and chip away at her health with Psy Blasts. We need to take about 1/5 of her health down to trigger the next phase. In the second phase, Maligula takes a human form and is helped by several lesser enemies. She actually uses the same 2 techniques here, summoning snakes and a dash attack, although the dash is much easier to dodge. She's quick and will dodge most of the Psy Blast attempts unless slowed, and shots will still sometimes just bounce off her. Intern Adam will occasionally attack from outside the arena, stunning her for a few seconds. Once again, we use slowdown and Psy Blast while also trying to be mindful of the other enemies. Also, this happened. I'm not sure what happened here, but it looks like when she came in contact with this enemy that I had set on fire, she took some kind of mass stacked fire damage. Is this a glitch? Something I should notify the speedrun community about? I had to redo this phase a few times because I died, and I was able to reproduce this one more time, so maybe it's just intended. But anyway, after taking down some more of her health, we enter phase 3. In phase 3, she's once again in the form of a water spout. This time, she'll spit out 4 snakes instead of 3 and seems to move a bit faster. But besides that, this fight is the same as phase 1. I did summon my archetype Gur, which, even unupgraded, could tank an entire barrage of snakes before dying. It's a good distraction to allow us to focus on Psy Blasting. At the start of phase 4, 3 bomb-spawning enemies will appear. They launch bombs all around the arena that become proximity mines if they land. Maligula can also be damaged by the bombs, either by friendly fire or by picking them up with telekinesis and tossing them at her. They deal decent damage, but I found it better to have a safe arena, so I took those enemies out quickly. After that, it's pretty much the same as phase 2, except she might be a bit quicker. There's actually a bit of health debris here, which has been lacking so far in this fight. The bomb monsters also dropped a bit of health for me, though I'm assuming it's a high chance here that they do. Once we've dealt enough damage, Maligula will enter the 5th and final phase of the fight. For this phase, she's back in water spout form again, and from what I can tell, does absolutely nothing differently. And I only got 3 snakes this time, so she's arguably easier here than before. The real challenge is even getting here. In most games that I play, I tend to use the least amount of consumables possible, and while this game does offer health consumables, I didn't really use them at all throughout the game, this fight being no exception. In fact, as far as I know, you can only buy them, and since I never bought them, I never even have any on my person for the entire game, except the one that you start out with. And for the most part, you really don't need them. There's usually enough health pickups around so that you're not in too much danger, especially in the boss fights, as I've mentioned. However, in this fight, there are very little chances to recover health, save for the aforementioned debris in phase 4, and hoping that the ads drop health in phase 2 and 4, making this fight just as much about defense as offense. Dying restarts the fight from the beginning, and with every other phase being so similar, after only a few deaths I was able to learn her patterns and quickly finish her off. It kind of makes me wish the previous fights were more of this trial and error style, but oh well. Finally, Raz shares a touching moment with his grandma which causes him to rapidly increase in size. Giant Raz and Giant Maligula have one final showdown which is mostly an interactive cutscene. Maligula is vanquished, the day is saved, and Psychonauts 2 comes to an end. So there you have it, those are the bosses from Psychonauts 2. Honestly, this game is a bit easy, though incredibly fun, wacky, well written, and in my opinion it stays true to the feel of the original. I still prefer the original to this one, but this is a really great game, and I would recommend it even if you've never played the first. That's it for this episode, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on Boss Raid.